Hey guys, and welcome back to another Photoshop tutorial on the channel. Today we're going to be trying to repair or mend this old photograph. Now this is one of my old family photos, and I thought I'd go ahead and try and replace this. But before we do, and before I get into talking about how we're going to do that, it would be great if you guys could go ahead and subscribe to the channel and also like this video if you do enjoy. If you want to see any more tutorials on Photoshop or Lightroom, we have a massive bank of them on our YouTube channel, so go ahead and check those out. Now if you want to go ahead and check out on our website, I'll leave the link in the top of the description. There is a couple of free Photoshop actions that will be on the website when this video is up, so go ahead and check out that free action on the website. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and start doing this edit. Now, okay, so this is the photo we're going to edit. I'm going to go ahead and unlock the bottom layer and then just duplicate it so we have a before and after that we can look at. Now, the few tools we're going to be using today are going to be the Lasso Tool and also the clone stamp tool, and occasionally we may be using the brush tool, but we're going to start off with the Lasso tool. Now I'm going to show you what this can do. Now the idea here is we're just going to select areas like this. We'll draw around this selection here, this little tear in the paper. Now this layer, you've got to make sure it is rasterized. If you don't know how to do that, press Control click on your keyboard or right click and select rasterize layer. Now this layer has been rasterized, which then means we can go ahead and edit this layer. So if you press Shift Delete on your keyboard or Shift Backspace, you get up this fill selection. Now with this fill selection, it comes up immediately with color, black or white or something like that. Just go ahead and click on the contents thing here and select on content aware. You can just leave all of these things alone and then select OK, and Photoshop will go ahead and do its magic. Now the idea here is, you can see what it's done is it's taken information from around that selection and it's basically said, well, whatever's going on here should be repeated up here, and it's just duplicated that there. So if you go and press Command D on your keyboard, it then removes that selection. So this is quite good to do if you want to get rid of some of these really quick big ones here, and it's only really useful if you've got a background that isn't too complicated. So for example, these curtains in the back are perfectly fine. For example, on the shirts or the jackets, that's also perfectly fine because it's just one block color. So if I do that there, you can see this may work. Now this won't work on the face as well. For example, around the eyes it won't work, or anything like that. It will work on the forehead, but anywhere where there's too much detail it won't really work, because it's not that smart. But I'll show you how to do those later. So you can see if I just go ahead and do this, you can actually work through pretty quickly. Now if you are doing one of these edits, I do recommend you do it systematically. It's very easy just to get carried away and do what I've just done. Go from here to here, back up to here, and just start to remove some of these big scratches, just because it's actually quite satisfying to watch. Now you can do it that technique, but if you do it systematically, where you start on one corner and work across systematically, you're going to find you get more of it done quicker. Just because it's harder, when you get through the edit, it's a lot harder to recognize where all of these tears are once you've been looking at the image for ages. You'll know what I mean if you start to do that. So I'm just going to start on this top corner. I'm just going to press Shift Delete and then select OK. Now once I've done this already, it does remember that I've got the content aware selected. Now this is a good example of where it almost works. You can see it deleted the most of those tears, but what it's done is taken a copy of somewhere else in this image, various parts of this image, and pasted it on top. And obviously where it's taken a copy from, there are a couple of tears and creases in the image. So we're going to go ahead and touch up those little areas later, but you can see how quickly we can start to get this image to look a lot better than it already did. So for example, if I just take a really big selection, press Shift Delete and press Content Aware, you can see just how quickly we can start to edit this. Now here is a really good example of where it went wrong. If you get something like this turning out, where obviously it's just duplicated this area here and just moved his ear up, obviously that's not good enough, that's just going to look weird. So press Command or Control Z, and what you're going to want to do is start then to do smaller selections. So like that, for example, should be fine, and then try it again. And basically it's just a matter of trial and error. You can see there that one worked, but if it gets too close to something like a bit more detail, that's when you're going to start to get those errors. Okay, so that's how you do that type of restoration. The second thing we can do is come down to the clone stamp tool, which is this little stamp tool here. You can either select it on the toolbar or you can press S on your keyboard. Now if you go ahead and press the close bracket key, you can the close square bracket key, you can actually increase that brush size, and if you press the close open the open square bracket, brush, you can decrease the size. Now come up to here and make sure that you're on roughly 30%, 0% hardness. You don't want to go any higher than 30%. In fact, I probably will put it down to 20%. Okay, now the way this tool works is if, let's say, I am trying to sort out the forehead here, what you do is you get the brush tool, you select Alt on your keyboard and select an area of the image that is similar to where you are trying to repair. In this case, I'm trying to repair this crack on her forehead. So I'm going to try and duplicate the colours from here, just on her forehead. I'm not going to take the colours from over here, not from over here, just on her head, because it then will fit better. Now, if you had the hardness on 100%, you'll actually see exactly where you've drawn, which is why you put it on somewhere around 0%. I put it on 17%, but that should work just fine. So I pressed Alt on my keyboard, and all I'm going to do is just click, and you can see how that automatically layers over that crack. Now what you can do is then zoom in and reduce your brush size, and then just come up here and literally just paint over that crack using the clone stamp tool, and you can really see how quickly you can start to repair it. Here the problem you're going to get is it starts to look like a complete too sharp line, so you can then come to the brush tool, press B on your keyboard, then press Option or Alt just to select your colour that you want. Alternatively, you can come down here, double click on that, and then you get your colour picker tool like this. Select the colour that you want to fade in, so for example it's there. I'm then going to get my brush tool, put the opacity on about 40%, and I'm literally just going to paint across that line there, and then press Alt again, maybe slightly darker, decrease my brush size, and all I'm doing is trying to blend in that sort of sharp, harsh line that we introduced when we used the clone stamp tool. Now I've done that really quickly. I'm going to go ahead and try and do this edit really quickly, but those are the basics on how you would do it. So for example, now I want to fix this eye here. Now one of the things to take in mind is faces aren't symmetric. If I would just, I don't know, take for example this side of the face, cut it out, duplicate it and flip it, the face is going to look really weird. Faces aren't symmetrical. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the Lasso tool. We're going to click on around the eye, and we're just going to cut out the eye. Now, I know I said the face isn't symmetrical, but if you're using just small details, this is a really quick trick to sort it out and fix it quickly. So we've got one eye that's perfectly intact that we've selected. If you then come to your keyboard and press Command J, that will then duplicate that specific thing that you've outlined, and you can see here I now have an eyeball that I can just move around, floating around the image. So I'm going to go ahead and place it roughly over where it should be. I think about there is probably just fine. I'm then going to press Command or Control T on my keyboard, Control click on that, and then click Flip Horizontal. Then I'm going to press the tick up here and then place that image there. Obviously that looks completely wrong, but what you have now is the ability to repair that eyeball, because you have the information from this eye that wasn't there or isn't underneath that little. Okay, so press Command T, and I'm just going to rotate this eye, rotate the eye until I get it roughly in the position that I want it to be. I've put the opacity down so I can see where the eyeball is underneath. If I turn it off and on again, I probably ought to move it left a bit and down a bit, and I think there we're probably looking at what we should have. So if we go ahead and put the opacity back up to 100%, we're almost good to go. Now this looks really weird because you've got a weird cutout outline. The way to fix that is come down here and select a mask tool. You don't want to use the rubber tool or the eraser, you want to use masks all the time while you're using Photoshop. The eraser tool really you shouldn't be using if you can help it. I'm going to come onto the brush tool, decrease the size, and you can see here it's put the background or the foreground color as white. I'm now going to select black as my foreground color. Now you can press D on your keyboard to reset your color palette, and then X to switch these two around, and you want black to be your foreground color. So I'm just going to go ahead, put my opacity on my brush up to 100%, and then I'm going to go ahead and just erase or mark out the outline there. And all I'm doing is I'm making the eye, or trying to blend the eye in to the image. Now the problem we've got here is this side of the face is lit up, this side of the face is darker, but we're going to try and sort that out in just a minute. But you can see already the eye is beginning to fit into that image. Now if you use a brush tool, I recommend again you have your hardness on about 0% hardness, which then feathers it out a lot more. The problem you've got there is the feathering also goes into the image, so you want to come again, press X on your keyboard, make white the foreground color, and then paint back in the iris that may have been removed while you were removing the outside. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just label this layer I, and then I'm going to come down here. I'm going to come to the brightness and contrast, and I'm literally going to clip that layer by pressing Alt to the layer below it and drop the brightness just a little bit until I think it's probably about the same that it should be because of the light on this side of the image. So that's just been done really quickly. If I go ahead again, you can just make any final adjustments and just paint in that eye. Okay, so if I zoom out, if you hadn't known beforehand that the eye had been damaged, and obviously I need to sort out the crack here and the crack here, but you wouldn't really notice from this far out that the eye has been duplicated from this side and replaced on this side. So again, if I just turn off the eyeball, that's what we had before, and now that's what we have afterwards. So that's how we can go ahead and sort out those fine details like that. Other things like here, for example, the corners of these corners of the jacket collars, you can go ahead and use the stamp tool to do those. One thing I like to do is I like to just go ahead with the selection tool and just sort out the big creases and then go in and do the little details later on using the stamp tool. So once again, coming onto the lasso tool, if you press L on your keyboard, that's a quick shortcut, and I'm just going to draw over the hat, and we're going to cross our fingers and hope this does something. I'm going to select the layer here, press Shift Delete and then enter. The problem we've got, I think this is too large a selection to actually work, but we can see, oh no, it actually does work. It did a pretty good job there trying to repair it. So you can see how quickly you can actually begin to repair these images, and it just becomes a quite methodical process. You've got to be patient. It will take a few hours to do, but after a while you'll actually get there and you will have completed your image, and it will look quite cool afterwards. It's always fun to see the before and after to see what it looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and just spend the next few hours of my life trying to repair this image, and I'll probably get back to you once I've done with it, and I'll show you the before and after. But all we're doing is just using those techniques I taught you. We're just going through and we're just going to try and just continue that all the way around the image until we get basically what we're looking for. Okay, so I have gone ahead and finished the edit, well, more or less at least. So you can really see the difference that it's made if I show you the before photo. That's what we started off with. Now, I was really worried about this area here on the left, and especially this area here on the right. These two areas where we've got these massive tears in the paper. I really thought we'd have a lot of trouble removing this and saving this part of the image. But you can really see how the lasso tool really does help in these areas. So if I turn on the after again, you can really see how much difference it has made and how much of the image we've saved. It's kind of like just a magic button you turn on and off again, and you suddenly have the image returned. It's really fun to just have a look at the before and after all the time, but that's how you can go ahead and really save your image. Now, there is one last thing that you guys can do to save your image just a little bit more. And that is using the brush. Now, when you use the brush tool, you want to go ahead and create a new layer, and you want to come over to your brush tool here, and you want to select a hardness of about 50% to 0%. It depends on where you're painting. And we're only going to use the brush tool in areas that have a block color. So say, for example, here, the waistcoat vest type thing, all black, mainly you can't see much change in shade on here, or alternatively on the hat, especially underneath the hat here, or these bits of hair. So we're going to be using the waistcoat and maybe the hat as an example. So let's start off with the hat. If I zoom in just to work on this one area, what we're going to do is, like I said, get the brush tool, press B on your keyboard to get it up, increase the brush size to whatever you need using the close square bracket, or decrease using the open square bracket, and then press Option or Alt on your keyboard, depending if you're Mac or Windows, and we're just going to select a color. So let's say we start here. I press Option, and you can see we get up this color picker tool, and this top semicircle shows you the color that you are selecting, and the bottom is the color that you selected previously. So we're going to select this color here, and we're literally just going to paint around the image. So we're just painting the underneath of the hat, the rim of the hat, and we're just going to decrease the brush size and get as precise as we can, making sure that we really don't go over the edges too much, and we're just going to keep to the actual line of the hat as best we can. And the idea is we're just removing these little white spots that appear in the image just because of the old wear and tear of the image. Now, when you get to a point like here where the image starts to change color, press Option again on your keyboard and you can just continue to paint round. Then we're going to come to here, press Option again, and it's quite important that you continually make sure you update the color, and you want to choose a color near to where you're working. So you see there, I just selected roughly where we're painting, and it's very close to where we're painting, and all we're doing is just basically repainting in the color that has been lost. You don't have to spend too much time on it, especially if it's just one block color. Just make sure you kind of keep to roughly where the image is. Like that should be just fine. I'm just going to do that corner again. Now I'm going to try up here. Now the problem we've got up here is the hat does have a few creases in it, so we may end up just losing the 3D texture of the hat. But again, if you want to just fix some of the image, again, it's quite ideal if you go down to hardness 0% and just paint it again. It just helps them blur the colors together just a little bit more. And I'm just coming in and painting over the hat. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish this hat and show you how much difference it makes. Okay, so I've gone ahead and I've just painted in the hat there. Now you can see here where we could start to get a few issues. Obviously this looks like it's just been painted on because we've got these block changes in shade. I tried to keep to it as much as I could without sort of making it too obvious that I've painted just in one block color. So I've tried to keep some of the shades in there. The best way of doing that is just constantly pressing Alt on your keyboard and reselecting a new color. But you can see roughly how that works. So if I zoom out, and I'll label this layer here hat, so we got us, so we can see what we're doing. You can see how that's basically we've just painted over a hat and got a new look there. Now, obviously that does look like it's just been painted on like a clip art sort of hat. But if I turn it off and on again, you can see the difference that's going to make if we can fix that. So one thing that's really cool to try and do is you can do two things. One, come to your opacity and just lower your opacity just a bit, let's say 50%. And what that does is it really fixes just some of those light spots and just sort of fills them in ever so slightly, so it's less harsh in the eyes, less obvious that there is any damage over there on the hat. So if I turn that layer off and on again, you can see the real difference that's brought to life in the image. The second thing you can try is just put the opacity back up to 100% for the time being, come up to filter, come to blur, Gaussian blur, and all this is going to do is we're going to choose a value that merges these colors together. So you can see here what it's done is it's really faded these colors together quite nicely and mixed them so it's less harsh. Problem is we've got this sort of blur look going on the outside. Now from here we have two options. So we can decrease the radius to something like 4 where we have less of a blur around the outside but still some mixing going on in the middle. I prefer to do method 2 where we increase or leave it on about 20%. Where we've got a nice look there. Press OK, come down to here, select the mask tool, press B on your keyboard, make sure you reselect your color palette to black as a foreground color. You can press D to reset it and then X to switch these colors. Make sure black is your foreground color. And once again, we're going to zoom in here and we're just going to very nicely come into control, click and put our hardness on about 60%, or you could do it up here and select hardness 63%. Something around there is perfectly fine, doesn't have to be exactly 63%. And all we're going to do is we're going to paint. So I'm just pressing shift to make sure I'm getting these sharp lines that aren't wobbly. And we're just painting around the outside. And you can see here what's actually happening is by using the mask tool, we're painting away some of that layer. And what we're doing is we're just selecting the areas that have leaked out because of the Gaussian blur, and we're just removing those using the mask tool just to kind of give us that sharp edge that we're looking for in the image, just so it doesn't look like this image has been over edited and repaired. And you can really see when I zoom out, I'm going to show you how much of a difference this does make. In these little areas here, decrease my brush size, come in and do a slight bit more of adjustment. And if I go somewhere I don't want to, I can press X and I can paint it back in again. Oops. Just like that. Okay, so here we are. That is the edit just done there. Now if I turn this layer off, you can see the hat before and how that looked, and now after we've used the brush tool just to repair those final parts of the image. So it really does bring it back together again. Now I've gone ahead and I've done it on the vest, just to give you another example. Here on this layer here, I did this earlier, so I call that vest, and I turned that on. I just used the exact same technique and I painted over the areas. Now you can really see why you need to choose an area that's just one block color, and it wouldn't really work on the jacket here because there's so many different shades. But that's basically it. If you want to go ahead and repair your image, there are a few more touches up we can do here and on the face around here, but I really think that's the best we're really going to get for the time being. So go ahead, save your image and export it, and you have done. So if I just group all of that together, I can show you what this image looked like before, and then if I do all of that edit, how it looks like afterwards. So there's the before and there is the after. So I hope you guys did enjoy this tutorial. I hope it was useful. It's been a very long tutorial, but I hope it's been useful. If you want anything more like this in the future, we may do a colorizing a black and white photo in the future, but we'll see you in the next one. Like I said, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Live long and prosper.